Can Coach Sig turn IU around? Big Ten Media Days has been going on for the past few days, and all the other media days for the other conferences have been going on around this time as well. So that signals one thing. College football is right around the corner, and we got to start doing some predictions for teams around college football. I'm going to start doing some predictions for some teams, and I probably will do conference-wide predictions as we get closer to the start of college football season, because it will be tough to cover every single team individually. But Indiana football is an interesting team to talk about for 2024. That hasn't been the case the past few years. After the Michael Penix 2020 season, where Indiana was a touchdown away from knocking off the Ohio State Buckeyes and possibly going to the college football playoff, which is as crazy as it sounds, because the last 3 years for Indiana, with the final 3 years of the Tom Allen era, did not go well. Indiana did not make a bowl game in any of those seasons, and Indiana still hasn't won a bowl game since 1991. But Curt Cignetti, the former James Madison coach, he's in town to fix all of that. And I'm going to go over Indiana's schedule, some of the comments that Curt Cignetti has made, and the roster that the Hoosiers have, and whether I believe that IU will be turned around as quickly as Curt Cignetti's first season and that the Hoosiers can make a bowl game, or whether I believe that it's going to be the same old for Indiana football and they're going to have another rough season, because a lot of people are not convinced that the Hoosiers are going to be turned around. Now, one thing that is in Indiana's favor is that the Big Ten has gotten rid of divisions like all the other conferences have. So the uneven Big Ten East, Big Ten West thing that has been getting on my nerves for the past decade, that is gone. So now all the teams in the Big Ten are playing relatively even schedules. It's not perfect, because some years you're going to have harder schedules than in other years. It's never going to be perfect. That's just the way that it goes. But with the 4 teams coming from the Pac-12, now that the Pac-12 has been completely annihilated, it does no longer exist. And now UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington are in the Big Ten. The Big Ten does not have divisions, so every single team in the league is going to have a different schedule every single year, some harder, some easier, and only certain teams are going to play every year, like Indiana's going to play Purdue every single season because they're rivals. But that's going to make it easier for Indiana, and what also could help Indiana out is Curt Cignetti is for real. If you saw his Big Ten media press conference, he's not taking any slack from any other program in the Big Ten. He's saying Indiana's for real. We know that he was for real when he first got hired, when he said Ohio State sucks and Michigan sucks right after saying Purdue sucks. It would have been edgy just for him to say that Purdue sucks and not say anything else. But he said Ohio State and Michigan sucks too, even though Indiana has not beaten Ohio State in almost 40 years, and they've only beaten Michigan once in the past 35 years. Curt Cignetti is a confident man, and he is not just saying these things out of left field and trying to act like he's going to be able to turn Indiana around and he's got no basis behind it. He actually has been a winner. If you look at his record, Curt Cignetti has had almost a flawless record as a head coach. At James Madison, he was 52-9 and 31-4 in conference play. And overall as a head coach, he's been 119-35, which is absolutely incredible. There are not many coaches in college football that have had a record as good as that throughout his coaching career. That's almost as good of a record as Nick Saban when he was at Alabama. And it's kind of ironic that Curt Cignetti was a former assistant coach for Nick Saban back at Alabama in the late 2000s. So he has experience under one of the best coaches in college football history, if not the best coach of all time. So that's in Curt Cignetti's favor. One of the things that's against Curt Cignetti is that he's only won at lower schools like IUP, Elon, and James Madison. He has never won at a bigger school as a head coach. So that can still make you skeptical, but he did turn around some pretty poor programs in those 3 schools before he took them over. It's not like those schools were doing very well when he took them over. Those schools were rough, but he ended up turning all 3 schools into winners. So that is a very confident thing if you are a believer that Curt Cignetti will be able to turn Indiana around. And it's a lot better than what Tom Allen did in Indiana, going 33-49 and 18-43 in the Big Ten. That's an absolutely horrid record. Tom Allen only had 2 good seasons, and Tom Allen, he was a nice guy. Love Tom Allen to death, but he was not the right guy to lead Indiana football, especially once things started going off the rails. Curt Cignetti Cignetti's confidence might be able to make Indiana a consistently solid team in the Big Ten. Only time's going to tell. But if you don't have confidence, how are you going to be able to turn around a program that's the losingest program in Power 4 history in college football? That's why I think Curt Cignetti's the right guy for the job. And when you look at Indiana's roster, they have a lot of new faces. Indiana football has done a fantastic job bringing in players this offseason. They have the number 28 ranked transfer portal class and the number 46 ranked class overall. And even though you can say it's only number 46, that's not all that good considering where Indiana's been in the past, where their recruiting rankings have been as low as in the 60s and 70s. 46 isn't all that bad. Tom Allen did have a top 30 class once, but still it wasn't enough to make Indiana a consistent winner. And what's more important is that transfer portal class being in the top 30. I think that's going to definitely pay dividends next season for Indiana when all of these guys get on the field, especially the James Madison guys, players that Curt Cignetti already has prior experience to having coached them for the past few years at James Madison. That's going to be able to help translate over to the Big Ten, even though it will be interesting if those James Madison players can consistently provide the same production that they had at James Madison over to Indiana, because they're going to be going up against much tougher competition. But if anybody can get the most out of these James Madison players, it's Curt Cignetti, since he has been coaching them for the past few years. Elijah Surratt, he was a fantastic transfer portal addition for Indiana football. He should lead the wide receiver room for the Hoosiers, along with Donovan McCulley, who's one of the returning players for Indiana football because of the fact he had a good season this past season for Indiana, and Curt Cignetti was able to keep him out of the transfer portal, which is huge. It says a lot because he was getting offers from some big-time programs in the transfer portal, but Curt Cignetti was able to get him to return. Miles Price, another transfer portal receiver, is also going to be a guy that should start for the Hoosiers next season, but IU has a deep wide receiver room because they got Keyshawn Williams, Miles Cross, and EJ Williams, and Omar Cooper as well that should all get significant snaps next season. I think Indiana might have one of the best wide receiving rooms in the Big Ten, if not in college football. But it doesn't matter if you have a good wide receiver room if you don't have a good quarterback. But Indiana's got Curtis Rourke coming over from Ohio University, and he was MAC Player of the Year 2 years ago, had some injuries this past season, but he's a guy that has a lot of experience. His older brother, Nathan Rourke, has actually played in the NFL a little bit, so that shows he's got a good pedigree, and he is a guy that, when healthy, has had a lot of success in college football, won a lot of games, but he's going up against Taven Jackson, who also is coming back for Indiana from this past season. He split time with Brendan Sorsby for Indiana last year in 2023, could not consistently win the job, but Taven Jackson, the younger brother of Trace Jackson Davis, he has a successful pedigree in his blood, but we'll see if he can compete with Curtis Rourke for the job. I think that Rourke will win the job at the end of the day, but Indiana also has Tyler Cherry, who could be the quarterback of the future. He was a 4-star quarterback recruit that was committed to Duke, but he ended up going to IU after Mike Elko left for the Texas A&M job. So Indiana has some talented options at quarterback, even if Curtis Rourke doesn't work out. But Curtis Rourke should be the guy that starts for Indiana at the beginning of the season because he has the most experience, and he also has a familiar target in Miles Cross at wide receiver, who also transferred from Ohio. And then you've got some good running backs in Justice Ellison, Kalen Black, and Tyson Lawton. All three of those guys were transfers, and they should help Indiana have a solid run game. But it all comes down to the O-line. For Indiana's offense to be good, the Hoosiers have to have a good offensive line. And Bob Bostad was the only coach that was retained from the Tom Allen era at Indiana, the former Wisconsin assistant coach. He is a guy that I believe is going to have a lot of success this season with Indiana's offensive line. Indiana's brought in some talent through the portal. Guys like Nick Kidwell and Trey Wettig. Trey Wettig was actually from Wisconsin. He's a big body. And then Indiana's got some returners and Carter Smith that are really talented, and Mike Kadick. Carter Smith's a guy I think that could play in the NFL one day. So Indiana's O-line should be better next season in 2024, even though they're going to be going up against some tough Big Ten defensive lines. Indiana's tight end room is probably going to be the weakest on the entire offense, with Zach Horton really the only big name in that position who was a transfer. But Indiana's offense is looking a lot more dangerous than last season for sure. And then on defense, there's a whole host of new names. Indiana doesn't even have that many guys returning from last year's team. Indiana only has returning guys like Jamari Sharp, Josh Sanguinetti, and Linnell Carr, but almost the rest of the entire defense is new. But guys like Mikel Kamara, CJ West, and Aiden Fisher, they look to lead the Hoosiers to be at least a decent defense in 2024. I don't know if their defense is going to be as good as their offense, but Curt Cignetti did bring over the defensive coach coach from James Madison, and he has had a lot of success. So he should be able to get the most out of that defense. They just need to wreak havoc, kind of like Kane Womack's defense did for Indiana in 2020. That's the reason the Hoosiers had a lot of success, along with Michael Penix. But the defense probably going to be the weaker side of the ball, but it should be solid overall. But the schedule for Indiana is the big key. Indiana's schedule is easier than it's been the past few years. And when you look at the teams Indiana is going to have to play, you can see why. Florida International is who IU starts the season with. That should be a win for Indiana. Western Illinois should be a win as well. And Charlotte. Those three non-conference games should be easy wins. There are no Louisvilles on the schedule, no Virginias, no tougher teams that Indiana's had to play in the past. All three of those should be easy dubs, especially if Curt Cignetti has this team where I think he's going to have this team. Then you got UCLA on the road. That's the first tough game. Week 3 at night on NBC. A lot of the nation's going to have their eyeballs on this game. And it's the first time Indiana's playing in the Rose Bowl since the 1960s. So it's a big deal for the Hoosiers and Hoosier fans. UCLA got a new head coach in Deshaun Foster. Things are looking kind of tough for them. Indiana is being picked low in the Big Ten for next season at number 17 out of 18 teams, which is really frustrated Curt Cignetti. But UCLA is also being projected to finish very low in the conference as well. That's a swing game, but I actually am leaning toward Indiana getting this win because I feel like Curt Cignetti, he's a proven coach. Deshaun Foster is not, and I think that Indiana is going to catch UCLA reeling a little bit in those first few weeks of the Deshaun Foster era where he's trying to get things together. I believe IU is going to win that game and start out 4-0. Then you got Maryland at Northwestern and versus Nebraska. Those three games are going to determine whether Indiana has a fantastic season or just an average season because those three games are all winnable for Indiana. I believe that they're going to at least win one of these games. I don't think that they're going to win all three. Two's a little bit skeptical. Nebraska is going to be a better team in 2024 with Matt Rule. And at Northwestern, it's on the road, but they're kind of a mess because they're going to have a new field, and they're also going to be a Big Ten West team that's now going to be playing a tougher schedule. So that's going to be tough on them. Maryland, they're going to be an interesting team to watch next season since Talia Tagovailoa is gone. I believe that's a swing game, but I would lean toward Indiana losing to Nebraska, beating Northwestern, and possibly losing to Maryland as well. They can maybe win that game, though. I could see them beating Maryland. Then Washington's a loss, even though it's at home. I could see Indiana winning it, but it's not most likely. At Michigan State, that is a winnable game. If Indiana beats Maryland, I could see them losing to Michigan State, or if they beat Michigan State, I could see them losing to Maryland, or maybe winning both if Indiana has a really solid season. That's why when you look at ceiling and floors, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I think Indiana has a decent ceiling for 2024 if they can win against all these teams that are on their level or maybe just a little bit better than them. But I think Curt Cignetti, even though he's a confident guy, I think in the first season for the Hoosiers, there's going to be a little bit of ups and downs. So that's why I don't think they're going to win all these games, just being a little bit conservative with my estimates. Then Michigan, Ohio State, those are losses. Even though Curt Cignetti said both of them suck, I just don't see them winning against either of those teams in his first year, but you never know. And then versus Purdue. Purdue is picked to finish last in the conference. Ryan Walters is trying to beef up his team for 2024, but not a lot of positive things going for Purdue right now. They've lost most of their best players. I don't see Purdue having a good year, and it's at Indiana. I think the Hoosiers are going to take back the old Oak and Bucket. So basing off all of that, what is my record prediction for Indiana football in 2024? I asked on Twitter, will Indiana football make a bowl game this year? And it's about 50-50. 46% of people said yes. 53% of people said no. And I understand that. People are still really skeptical about Indiana football and Curt Cignetti. But I am a believer in Curt Cignetti. And I think that their ceiling is 8-4. I almost would say 9-3, but I'm thinking that their ceiling is 8-4. Their floor is 5-7. I really just don't see with the track record Curt Cignetti has of never having a losing season as a head coach. I just don't see them going worse than 5-7. But my record prediction for Indiana football is 7-5 and 4-5 in the Big Ten. I think they win the 3 non-conference games, beat Northwestern, knock off UCLA, beat Michigan State, and beat Purdue. And then they're going to lose to Maryland, Nebraska, Washington, Michigan, and Ohio State. That's going to be a good year for Indiana. 7-5, 4-5 in the Big Ten. I believe in Curt Cignetti. I think he's going to be able to turn around the Hoosiers a significant amount in 2024, get them back to a bowl game, and possibly be able to win their first bowl game since 1991. They've got an easier schedule, a lot of new faces. There's going to be some ups and downs. It's not going to be a perfect road for the Hoosiers. But Curt Cignetti, he's much more confident than Tom Allen, and I think that's going to bleed over to his players to a solid season for Indiana football in 2024. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What record prediction you have for the Indiana Hoosiers and whether you believe that they're going to make a bowl game in 2024 2024, or whether you don't think that Curt Cignetti is going to be able to turn around the Hoosiers yet, or if at all, and they're going to underperform and go under 500. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.